series is entitled 1 Year Out, Before, During, and After COVID. And today you're all here for our first session, which we've entitled Paradigm Shifts in Education, Successful Schooling, and COVID-19. I'll let you know if you look at our website, and we'll put it in the chat box. You can see the dates and times for our remaining two sessions in this webinar series coming up in June and August. And we're hoping to feature different voices. Right now we have school leaders from across the sectors in the state. We have the Teacher of the Year, and we have all sorts of voices from leaders and teachers. We do hope to invite other voices down the road, including perhaps parents and students. So we're very excited about that. I'm going to jump right in and talk about the goal of our seminar series. The idea is that we here at St. Louis University are thrilled to be able to interact with policymakers and leaders on key policy questions. Our job is to try and serve the community by bringing talented and committed people together to talk about these issues, to try and figure out how to move these challenges forward, how to address these challenges. And just to jump right in, our leader today, our moderator today, is Dr. Art McCoy. At age 18, Art was a certified substitute teacher, one of the youngest around. By 19, he became the youngest certified teacher in Missouri. By 33, in December 2010, Dr. McCoy became the youngest superintendent and CEO of a district above 2,000 students in Missouri, and in Ferguson-Florissant's first African-American CEO at age 33. He was a leader in Harvard's Pathway to Prosperity program. In February of 2016, Dr. McCoy was named superintendent of Jennings School District, and under his leadership, multiple graduating classes have achieved 100% graduation, career, and college placement, as featured on various news outlets. He's state, national, and international advisor and consultant, as president of his own organization, SAGES, Severing Achievement Gaps in Education. We're so excited here at SLU to have Dr. McCoy serving as our first distinguished fellow in the School of Education. As his first endeavor in his role as distinguished fellow, Dr. McCoy is going to moderate this session. So let me hand it over to Dr. Art McCoy. Art, thanks very much.
It's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you, Dean Ritter. It's so good to see each and every one of you. And thank you to our esteemed panel of great experts, leaders, colleagues, and our fearless leader, the Commissioner of the State of Missouri for Education, Margie Van Dieven. Dr. Van Dieven, thank you for being with us. We have Doug Thaman, who's over a charter school network that's amazingly successful in the region, who you're going to hear from after we hear from the great good friend of mine, Tamiko Armstead, who's the fearless CEO and leader of Cardinal Ritter. So we've provided you with leaders from the region that can seriously address the questions of, okay, we've been through a year of the pandemic, now what? And we wanted to provide you with this context, with these leaders, to help you hear what has occurred and then to prepare for the strongest day one for our summer sessions as well as the next school years. Please chat any questions, any comments that you may have, because we have our set questions. We're going to answer them in our first 5 minutes, and then we're going to have a discussion, which I will lead. So let me jump right in, because I get 5 minutes to share some things, and then I'm going to stop, hopefully before even 5 minutes. So I'm going to stop at 11:11, because I like the alliteration of 11:11. So that's 4 minutes. I've taken a minute of my time already. And then I'm going to immediately turn it over to Dr. Van Dieven, our commissioner, to give you the state view and beyond. So I've put in the chat box a PowerPoint. This PowerPoint is actually being shared for those who are attending MOASPO, and it is based off of a course that I led in Dubai in the UK of the question of how to do schooling during the pandemic. And then we had recently our 1 year milestone of schooling during the pandemic. So I want to share with you the paradigm shifts. As I see it for education, it was also presented to the Missouri legislature as they begin to write laws for this next school year, Senate bills and more. There are a lot that are on the table. My contact information is there, and you can take your time to go through this later, but I'm going to only use my 4 minutes as described. So first, I want to point out the framework of AC, BC, and DC, or BC, most people think before Christ, before Common Era, stands for before COVID. AC, after COVID, not after Christ or after Common Era. In DC is during COVID. It's important to understand that framework so that you look at the mitigations and controls for reopening schools. If you click on this link, you'll see our first video of reopening schools, the first to do so in St. Louis County and city, for really at the request of DESE with regard to having some childhood services for first responders as early as April. And then we perfected some things. I became a contact tracer by May, and we opened up for students by the summer. And then we opened on time. I also want to talk about the paradigm shifts in education, the PEACE model, and I'll quickly describe PEACE and some of the things we've done from being, I think, the only district in the state that has 2 grocery store hubs that we own and operate for food every day. That's important during a pandemic and before. 2 health-based school clinics, elementary and high school levels, and a dentistry clinic, I think the only dentistry that does free dental work through Delta Dental, and our 2 homeless shelters that we own and operate. So there's an article that I wrote, you can look at it at a later time, that's entitled The Paradigm Shifts, and it really focuses on this one thing of, in DC during COVID especially, and even before then in BC, before COVID, which was before March 2020, it was important to offer work-based learning for our students, paid apprenticeships. So we guaranteed every child paid apprenticeship before leaving school and up to 60 college credit hours at no cost. And they would get paid like $20 an hour for these apprenticeships. So when everyone closed school around April, statewide, I remember the day, it was April 9th, because I was on the reopening schools task force with the commissioner and the governor. And it was April 9th that the governor made that press conference with the commissioner that said all schools in the state would be closed. Having the incentive of getting paid to earn and learn was an incentivizing factor for our kids, saying, okay, even though there's a pandemic, I still want to earn and I still want to learn. So while the mitigation factors of closing schools and going virtual was essential for us, and we did so right after meeting with Spring Schmidt on March 15th on a Sunday in the county executive's office, and Spring shared with me and about 6 other superintendents, hey, you guys might want to close school for the rest of the calendar year of 2020. And we were trying to wrap our heads around that school closure until further notice. Frankly, we shifted very quickly. We were already one-to-one computers to students, but we became one-to-one with Chromebooks to students and one-to-one for connectivity to students. Now, my journey was having had that insight knowledge and from the health department, and then having that connection and having a meeting, and then knowing that this would be there, we began to rally the county executive for CARES Act funding, and I asked particularly for money for enough connectivity for everybody. And he graciously gave $4 million to the area school districts that you actually could apply through the library to get connectivity. So by the time April occurred, you know, we were in a situation of one-to-one computers already. We had one-to-one Chrome connectivity by June. And we were already doing some connectivity before then as a school district, but we had enough for every family by June. But the key part was not letting COVID defeat us. On March 15th, when we're told to close schools for the rest of the academic year by the county health department, and on April 9th, when schools closed until further notice by the governor, we didn't know what we didn't know. So ultimately, it was important to become a contact tracer, certified contact tracer. The governor led sessions across the state of Missouri, and he led one in Jennings for the area superintendents of public schools. And here's the timeline of what was done and shared. I became a contact tracer in April, got the certificate in May, worked on the MSBA reopening schools format with the president of MSBA, Melissa Randolph, and others. Supported becoming a contact tracer and supported with childcare at the request of DESE and others for our first responders. Started in-person 3rd grade through 12th grade learning in July, and then got CARES funding by July for the region. Ultimately, that's all the past. The question is, where do we go in the future in my 10 seconds to 30 seconds remaining? What we've learned, and you'll see from these slides, are if you have a triple redundant system, even those who don't have vaccination can be safe in schools. Being a part of the research from the CDC with Jason Newland and Rachel Unlizer, it's clear that schools are safer environments than out of school environments for kids and for adult teachers, if you abide by the mitigation strategies. So mitigation strategies are essential, but also, you know, vaccinations are a part of what is occurring. And I think that it's essential to have a form and a format to assess safety. So this is the SAFE form. I call it the SAFE form for safety assessment for educators, school, and mitigation. And it pretty much outlines a checklist that goes up to 100, because we as educators like 100% of things. And if you circle the right indicators, you know, is there physical distancing? Are there mask usage, hand washing, cleaning, so forth? You get a total. Well, in this case, it's a 55% or an F. As administrators, we're able to bring those lower things up to higher things like the use of masks, perhaps, physical distancing for sure, hand washing 5 times or more a day, and cleaning, and you're able to bring a 55% up to 88%. So I'll conclude there to say that's where we currently are with our in-school practices, having been in school since day one, having less than 20 COVID cases from our more than 400 staff and more than 3,000 students or 2,500 students plus pre-K. And ultimately, we are poised to know that you must provide a high degree of trauma-informed practices with mental health services for your staff because they are handling a lot. We have 2 dedicated staff for mental health. You must provide mental health services for your students and parents because of anxiety, isolation, and more. But most importantly, we must flip Maslow's hierarchy or Bloom's taxonomy because of Maslow's hierarchy of need. Bloom's is, you know, knowledge, comprehension, evaluation, synthesis, and application, synthesis, and evaluation being last. So we're flipping that evaluation to be not last, but first. That's the point. Flip Bloom's taxonomy from KCASE, knowledge, comprehension, analyzing, and synthesis and evaluation to make evaluation first. The question is, why are we doing this? Competency-based learning is important right now. Mastery-based learning is important. Why are you coming to school after holidays when there's been a lot of traveling? Maybe put some mitigation periods in there so that you can stay safe. So everyone must flip Maslow's or Bloom's because of Maslow's. Maslow's is the fact that we must tend to our safety and physiological needs. That's first. And love and belonging is important. That goes to the higher levels. But we are looking at evaluating what we're doing, why we're doing it, and now we have an opportunity to do something better and beyond what we've done before. So I'll stop there, and I will shift immediately to our commissioner, Commissioner of Education, Margie Van Dieven. Thank you for being with us. The floor is yours.
Oh, thank you so much. And what a great segue into where I was kind of heading. It's great to see all of you this morning. And I'll just touch on a couple of factors. One, I think it is really, really important a year later to reflect on where we were a year ago. I can't emphasize that enough. And I thank you for the opportunity to do that. Otherwise, we forget what it was like in those first weeks where we were scurrying and hospitals and others were coming to schools and saying, can we have your thermometers? Can you make us, I mean, they were asking for sewing machines. Can you have our students make masks? Can we learn how to develop hand sanitizers because those were off the shelves? And I mean, all of that work where our schools were right there, and then how things started to shift as we went forward. So if we start where we are today and forget about all that past, we lose a lot of insight into where we've been. So thank you, Dr. McCoy, for that opportunity and for some of that resurrection of the good work that did take place. You know, what we found here at the department on the statewide level was what many of people found at the local level too, and that is identifying your North Star. In any time of crisis, you find out what your role is, what you can do, and how do we make the most sense from this chaos for as many people as possible. And so our North Star completely became, as a local control state, how do we minimize disruption so that our school leaders can make as best decisions as they can for their students and the safety and well-being of staff and students, as was pointed out. So we knew we needed to make sure we could continue to pay our teachers, need to make sure we could continue to get funds out the door. And I should probably back up again by saying this hit everybody, right? This whole COVID experience hit everybody without a playbook. And so even at the state level, people think, you know, there's just a few of us in Jefferson City that like to think about education. Well, I actually have about 1,600 employees who we were also trying to figure out how do we make sure our state schools operate safely for kids in 36 different buildings across the state? How do we make sure that our VR and disability determinations are able to work from home? How do we make sure, as I said, that if our staff need to confine, if they are able to issue payments from home, like all of those kinds of things that we needed to make sure were in place for us as a staff and the safety and well-being of our staff, as well as serving and leading throughout the education community. So again, making sure we could get funding out the door, making sure people could continue to feed students. So that was huge for us, getting those USDA waivers in place and things so that schools could do that. And I will tell you that as a local control state, all Missouri school districts had their doors closed within 2 weeks of the announcement of the WHO's announcement of the pandemic. As Dr. McCoy talked about, schools came together later, met with the governor, and we said, let's just call it for the rest of the year in April. But as of March 19th, every school had made that independent decision that they were going to close their doors and work remotely for a period of time. Now, with it being a local control state, many of our schools have reopened their doors, as we know, and we were 5th in the nation with schools who were offering in-person learning as recently as 3 weeks ago. So feel really good about the movement that we've made as a state. And talking to my colleagues across the rest of the nation, I think Missouri educators did a phenomenal job, and I'm so grateful to each and every one of them. Hindsight 2020, let me just get a couple of my parts that were in there. If I was planning for day one, no playbook, but for this particular pandemic, and again, the next pandemic could look different, but for this one, we know that our schools should likely be the last places to close and the first places to open because of the way it interacts with students. And we understand that, as Dr. McCoy pointed out. The mitigation strategies are working, and we know that. And so we're asking, we have a webinar at 1 o'clock today, keep those mitigation strategies in place. It's too early to completely back off of those. They're working. We need to keep our schools among the safest places. We'll be looking a lot at vaccines. What will that mean for students? That be part of the conversation as well. What will the future look like on day one for that? We're learning more and more about the importance of airborne versus picking it up on, the intense cleaning may back off a little bit. Hand sanitizers will still be in place. Washing hands will still be in place, but it's more important that we're paying attention to our HVAC systems and the air mobility, learning about those kind of things. I would say that's a big one. And then also coming into understanding what, again, I think you're probably going to hear everybody say is, what do our kids need from us right now? And I ask that question every time I go out. Do they need academic learning? Do they need play, or do they need both? And really it's both. They definitely need the socialization of being together. That isolation has been hard on a lot of our kids. We know that. But we can't lose sight of the academics. So lots to talk about. Can't wait to hear from everyone. As you know, we could all probably talk about this topic all day long. So thank you very much for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. You've done an amazing job the entire course, and your job was already just incredibly difficult. I mean, having seen you in action as one of the best leaders I've worked with, having worked with 5 commissioners, but to do a pandemic that only comes in every 100 years, I must publicly acknowledge as a superintendent, we couldn't have done it as well without you. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. And it only happens every 100 years. That's great. Thank God. Just kidding. Okay.
That's right. We don't have to deal with the devil. Hopefully, knock on wood. Yeah, you never know. It's never too soon to have that go wrong. But thank you so much. I also would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that we have Missouri's Teacher of the Year with us, a dear person and friend of many of us, if not all of us, Misty Grandel. She is Missouri's Teacher of the Year. And oftentimes we have these conversations with only administrators, but we didn't make that mistake. We have someone who's directly going to speak about teachers and the state of teaching as it pertains to how it is teaching during this moment and what teachers need and how teachers can succeed in this time. So thank you so much, Misty Grandel, for being with us. So let's segue immediately. You've heard from a public school superintendent. You've heard from the commissioner who oversees all education in the state. My dear friend, please, let's move to Mrs. Armstead from Gardner-Ritter, CEO.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be on this panel with all of you. So thank you for this. I'm really, really excited about it. As a Black female married to a Black man for almost 25 years, raising 5 Black boys in St. Louis, I have to celebrate this moment, you all, of excitement that St. Louis has elected our very first Black female mayor. And, that's on the heels of sending our very first Black female to Congress, who also happens to be a Cardinal-Ritter College Prep alumna. So really, really excited about that this morning. It means a lot to our community. And I say that because we're still after all these firsts. And at Cardinal-Ritter College Prep, our population is 98% African-American. And we sit right here on the Delmar Divide, the infamous Delmar Divide that so many folks are familiar with. And I bring that up because when this pandemic came, it was impacting the Black community. Death rates were alarming and disproportionate. And when we were thinking about our students, we had to think about, okay, previously left out, marginalized, the racism that they experienced. How are we going to react to this in a way that doesn't set them back even further? Because oftentimes our kids are having to work twice as hard, 3 times as hard, just to be equalized. And so our mindset had to really focus on who we're serving in order to figure this out. And I'm so glad that Dr. McCoy brought up Maslow's, because we give credence to that from a standpoint of, the basic piece. And we knew we had to show up, right? With like, okay, basic needs have to be taken care of. People have to be kept safe. Everybody needs to be, staying at home initially. But then how do you get to that top, right? The top where it's self-actualization. We're always at Cardinal-Ritter, our mission is helping our kids live up to their very fullest potential, becoming the very, very, very best versions of themselves. So everything that we did had to connect with that. So if you're in a virtual environment, our current principal, he's about to get his doctorate, and it's about this correlation between high engagement being the equalizer across races. So for us, it had to be, what is it that we have to do to ensure that our classrooms, albeit virtual, are highly engaged, right? Because we couldn't just, do handouts, give kids work, let them work and come back. So we really focused on, if we're going to be virtual right at the very beginning, we've got to figure out how to be very highly engaged with our students and with our teachers. And that takes a lot of planning. That's not simple. So if you tell kids, hey, we're going to go into a breakout room, right? Well, you got a lot of planning to do around that. That's where, our assistant principal was very much on top of that. So for us, in COVID, what we learned was, really strong planning, getting from the bottom of the pyramid to the top, really strong planning, really, really strong high engagement from our teachers and from our students, and check-ins. Because, as administrators, right, we know so much, right? I'm so glad Dr. McCoy brought up, we have Teacher of the Year on here with us for a reason. We can come up with all these great ideas, roll it out, and say, you know what, because we came up with it, it's going to work. Well, we had to have these ongoing check-ins with our kids by class. How's this going for a freshman versus a sophomore versus a junior versus a senior? How are the teachers doing? And we got some pretty good feedback. And guess what that did? It allowed us to pivot. It allowed us to make some changes because they were the ones who were going through it. My best advice is plan. Make sure that whatever you're doing is highly engaging and that you are listening to the people that you're serving and connecting with your mission so that you don't set people back because of this pandemic. We don't want this to set us back. Even if it happens every 100 years, what's going to happen to those people that were part of it in that time frame if we allow this thing to set us back? Because now they're going to have more challenges. So that's really been our focus. Is going back to, and someone mentioned the word North Star. For us, our North Star is always our mission, and that has guided us and allowed us to really be successful. And I know we'll talk a little bit more about some of the things that we did. So again, thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Ms. Armstead. That's amazing and so passionate and powerful. Plan, have high engagement, and then reach towards self-actualization, staying true to your North Star. Thank you so much. And we appreciate your leadership. It's been outstanding, phenomenal. And I just have to add, we stole someone that was amazing from the business world and brought her into education. So we're so glad she's in education. Thank you. To my dear friend and the head of a charter school network, Dr. Doug Thurman. It's so great to have you with us. Please talk to us about the context in your leadership actions and what we should do in this current state of the pandemic, what I call DC, during COVID. Go for it.
Thanks, Arden. And it's really, and it is an honor to be here and to join this panel of really esteemed folks. So appreciate it. And Ms. Armstead, coming after you, that's a tall order to fill with all the great work you're doing. In thinking about this and our discussions in advance, talking about this webinar, really was thinking about what is it about the charter school model that, like a private school model, like a district model, every model has its strengths and its weaknesses, and what really were we able to do with this pandemic. And charter schools are independent schools, and one of the hallmarks of their independence is this inherent flexibility of the model. They're not tied down by centralized district bureaucracy, and so often those flexibilities charter public schools use to lengthen their school year, or to lengthen their school day, or to put in some different innovative models. But for the pandemic, it really allowed our schools to swiftly act, survey their families, best understand the pandemic's effects and critical needs, and that idea of engagement that everybody's talked about, engaging with community partners, engaging with school district partners, government agencies, local health department. One of those, maybe it's a silver lining of an awful pandemic, was it brought together agencies, departments, people who had all been working in silos for a long time to have deep conversation about how do we make sure we're still meeting the needs of our children. This included distribution of student devices, internet access, rapid development of online instructional materials and learning opportunities, addressing needs of our special education learners and our ELL students, the distribution of meals, helping out with housing resources, paying special attention to the neglect and child abuse concerns, and how do we make sure resources are in place for that. And so there was a lot of swift action that needed to take place, and nobody was doing this alone. It was everybody working at this together. And so then I look ahead to where we need to be, and that needs to continue. We know that there's learning loss with this pandemic. And going back now and looking at some of the national research and talking with different evaluation experts, they're estimating that students have lost about 3/4 of a year in reading and over a year of their skills in math. Why is that? Well, we know that learning isn't linear. It doesn't just happen one after the other. It's cyclical. Students have to have exposure, and that exposure has to come back around again and again for them to move those skills from short-term to long-term. And so they really lost a great deal of learning, more than actual days and time. And so we need to plan moving forward that every student is at least a grade level behind. We just need to accept that, take that, and plan towards that. So how do we do that? Well, lots of things that need to be in place. Continuing and further deepening relationships with families, prioritizing student and family outreach. That was a key. That was so important at the beginning of the pandemic, and it needs to stay in place. Teachers increasing their direct engagement with students through live instruction, regular check-ins, providing instructional supports to teachers, use of high standards curricula, ensuring 100% of students have access to an internet connected device. Even if they are returning to school, we don't know what 3 months from now will tell us. And we need to make sure they have internet connectivity just in case there is a step back. And then clearly communicating modifications for students with disabilities. Ideally, what does this all look like moving forward when we look at 21, 22? we can't, as educators, look at this pandemic as it was just a school crisis. It's a community crisis. It was a full community crisis. And so it's going to take the full community to help these students move forward and to make this accelerated recovery. And there are some things that really need to be in place. High dose tutoring and mentoring. How can we ensure that there is so much one-on-one support for these students that they have what they need to move forward? Well-structured summer school opportunities that are really content rich, and then multiple out-of-school learning opportunities. It's just not the school to solve the problem. It's not the school to address every issue in a silo, but how do we work with our out-of-school community partners? How do we make sure that maybe it's summer school for part of the day, but there are other opportunities to keep students engaged moving forward? And what can our community partners, how can they help with that? Those are some of the things we've been thinking about, been considering, and look forward to wanting our community to all work together to address this.
Wonderful, wonderful comments. I love what you shared, and I will emphasize the not having barriers and having the ability to do what you need to meet your students' needs. And you mentioned the list from meal distribution to computer to internet to the mental health. And so thank you so much, Doug. That is exactly what people, I believe, everywhere want to see schools do, including the staff. And so thank you for leading the way and showing that it can be done during the pandemic, and especially through the Charter Network. Now we have time, and we have a presentation from our Teacher of the Year, Missouri's Teacher of the Year. And we know that she's going to share wonderful remarks, and I'm interested as a leader to learn from her as to what teachers or thinking and what they need to succeed. So, Ms. DeGrando, this floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you for allowing me to join you and including a teacher in this conversation today. I just love the idea that we are looking back at this year and we're planning ahead for the future based upon what we've learned. I think that as far as actions are concerned, though, it's important for us to be certain to really have a few things in place for next year. First of all, let me say, though, that I think Missouri schools did truly an outstanding job. And I'm so happy to be in this state teaching because of the way that we handled the pandemic and learning. I love that so many of our kids were back in schools. And I love that no matter what, though, each district got to choose for themselves what was right for their students. And so those are just things that are things that we did so well last year. And I also think that everyone did everything they could in order to keep kids safe, to make sure that we continued with our kids first mentality, which is so important. And then also to continue with that instruction and learning on a day-to-day basis. And so it doesn't matter who you are in the school. It seemed to me that every single person put 100% of themselves into this year. And so again, I'm just so proud to be a part of this profession. But those areas that we could certainly change or maybe add support in, and a couple of people have mentioned this, would be social emotional learning. It has to be at the forefront of the professional development next year, and classroom implementation. Our students are going to come back to our classrooms and possibly, some of them still virtually, needing emotional and mental and psychological support. This year, we've had so many students, so many more than normal, who are finding themselves in mental health facilities for a short time. And that's because of the pressure that they've felt. We have more students who are facing depression or loss of a family member, or really even that loss of a dream for my high school students because they didn't get to have those experiences or those resume builders that they are so sure were so important to the college that they want to get into. And so this has caused just a lot of stress and a lot of strain on them. And honestly, that same stress and strain is on those teachers. They have those social emotional needs as well. So we have to be prepared to meet those needs fully. And what I mean by that is that we need to have mental health professionals available on campus for students and staff. On campus, not saying, hey, you can have the hour to go make an appointment or giving them insurance. It is specifically that they need to be able to speak to those people when they need them during the school day. And only that way will we all be able to truly heal from everything that has happened. So I mentioned virtual students, and I believe virtual academies or offerings will continue to be a must for next year, not only because we're in the middle of a pandemic, but because we've learned so much about it. And even though we've had those growing pains, we recognize that so many students have been so successful with virtual learning. And because of that, we have to recognize that it needs to continue. So we found that in many ways we were able to individualize education, each student more successfully. You talked about competency-based learning, and we were able to do that. And so in my opinion, yeah, virtual learning is going to be a major part of education in the future. And what that means is that districts need to find ways to make it work for their students specifically, for their teachers specifically. And so that means as a state, we need to focus on internet and infrastructure so that equitable access to digital education is available to our students. And if they don't have it now, we are making sure that they're going to. I teach in a district where 60% of our kids don't have internet access. We couldn't possibly not go back to school in August. We had to be there. And we have to continue then to make sure that that doesn't happen again in the future, that we are not putting them in danger, even though what we did find out was it's safest for kids to be at school. We didn't know that when we made the choice. And of course, we did everything we could to keep them safe, but we also knew that it was probably more dangerous to have them out of school, not learning for their future. And so it's something that we've got to do. We've got to just make sure that we are not widening the gap between the poorest and most disadvantaged kids just because of internet. And so if you know, as a rural teacher, that's something that I feel like we have to do. And there's one more that I think is so important, and that is that schools will have to have plans and scaffolding in place to look at learning loss. And it's more so than just, oh, we need to have these plans and we've got to get them caught up. What we have to do is figure out, where are these kids? How can we help them when they come into our doors to be successful? And I think if we have these goals set that are huge, then that may be too much when you consider where they're coming from when they come back next year. And so it's really going to be more along that lines of individual student care and what do we do for that student. And so, yeah, those would be the main things. But I do want to just say again that I'm so impressed with the schools in Missouri and also with the kids. I mean, we talk about how resilient they are. We talk about how amazing they are. But what it really amazed me this year is that they had what was almost a normal year. You know, they came to school. Sure, they wore masks, but they also learned. They learned the word cohorted, but they also played basketball. They dealt with COVID, but they still had dates. And so what's really amazing to me is that kids, no matter what, are going to find a way to be successful. And so I'm just so proud of them for that.
Amazing comments, as always, from Misty, our Teacher of the Year. Amazing comments. You know, the recaps I want to highlight, the 4 points. Social emotional learning is essential, and that's something we have to dig into deeper. Mental health matters for our staff and for our students. And then that we must continue virtual learning and hybrid models because it's going to be with us. And then lastly, making plans to make sure that we have learning growth. Since I'm on the growth model, I don't speak about learning loss. When I speak to my staff, I speak about learning growth and how to grow it. And so I want to make, and I'll add more as to why later, but those were the highlights I got. We definitely have to plan. And I know that Ms. Olmstead said the same thing, plan. All right, we have a great 49 minutes for some discussions. I see 3 particular questions. I'm going to kick off the first question, which is this, and I'm reading it from my other screen, that's why I'm looking away. Researchers say that mental health impacts from this pandemic will occur for about a decade. What is the Department of Education doing, or what plans might it have, and others, to address the mental health epidemic? And then we know how there are different approaches to address things, but what type of well-being approaches might we address and what may not be fiscally feasible? And so that's the core of the question. And it also talks a little about K-12 curriculum. If you wouldn't mind, I know this is going to go to the commissioner somewhat, but I want to help out a little bit by answering that just a tiny bit. And I'm going to be brief, but at the same time, I want to elaborate to something very important. So I said that Maslow's hierarchy of needs calls for safety to be addressed because you may lose your life to come to school. and physiological needs like water, food, and more, the distribution of meals, as Doug Thurman mentioned and others, because Bloom's taxonomy has been flipped. Now kids aren't just asking, why must I learn this math in life? Because this math, I don't think I'll ever need it. They're asking, why must I show up? Why must I stay? Because my life depends on it. So that's the flip model you see. But the point is to the mental health question. Because we all now are recipients of trauma. Like before COVID in BC, before March 2020, 7 out of 10 kids experienced trauma. But in DC during COVID, and I argue that DC will remain from March 2020 all the way to 2023, the 22-23 school year, that we're going to be in a DC environment, living with the trauma that COVID caused. What is trauma? It's basically a serious issue that happens as a result of physical, sexual, emotional abuse, neglect, violence, war, loss, pandemics, disasters, and other emotionally harmful experiences. So we've all had some of that. So mental health wise, here's my answer. You can see this article for more. Mental Health Matters, I wrote the article. The Department of Education has had multiple districts pilot the SES curriculum. I'm pleased to have been one of the districts where our counselors and teachers piloted the social emotional learning K-12 curriculum that will go to counselors next school year. And it will specifically deal with therapeutic actions, but also the themes that therapists use on teletherapy by phone for social emotional learning and mental health. And it will deal with the themes that many of us have been discussing here. So I wanted to just emphasize that DESE has taken a great stance of doing a grant, having leaders come together that were counselor teacher leaders and piloting this social emotional learning curriculum, which we piloted this entire year to provide therapeutic services, but also lessons in the classrooms that every teacher can teach to focus on major themes to have belonging, a sense of love, a sense of understanding where you are on your mood elevator. Am I in a horrible mood because I haven't eaten, I haven't sleeping, I don't know where my parents are, or whether I'm in a happy mood where I'm ready to learn? All of those things are written in third grade level language, if not a little bit more, so that you can understand. So that's my first response to that question. Commissioner, I'll turn it to you or anyone else on the panel to add more to the mental health question.
Thank you, Dr. McCoy. I'll answer it quickly, but I'd really love to hear from our panelists because I think they'll have even better insight into that. I appreciate those remarks and the support for DESE, and you know that I have appreciated your leadership and all of the many, many strategies that you've implemented in the Jennings district and being able to see how you're meeting kids' needs head on. This is an issue that we all have to deal with. Absolutely. The department's been very focused on what supports are needed and how to supply them with the coordination of the Department of Mental Health. But I'll tell you, the need exceeds the capacity right now, and we know that. And so what a lot of Dr. McCoy was talking about on our earlier work was on a number of preventative measures, dealing with children who we knew had trauma. But we're dealing with a whole new issue now when we're actually, as you indicated, some of our kids actually need the treatments and the teachers need the mental health resources to service them as well. So even when I say we're going to get these financial relief from the federal government that can be used for some of those services, it's identifying what is the actual need and then where do we find the supports that are out there? Do we have enough capacity in our state to serve those needs? So any help you can give on identifying what the specific needs are, where do we find those resources and where do we work together on these supports in a very, very proactive way will be and also reacting to it, but also preparing will be helpful. Our board, I can tell you the State Board of Education, a meeting doesn't go by where they're not talking about this topic and trying to figure out how do we best support those many, many needs out there, but would look forward to hearing from all of you. Know it is one of our very top priorities.
Thank you, Commissioner. Others? Okay, if you're good, you're good. Okay, the comment, it was proactive versus reactive approaches are essential, and I totally agree. That's why I wanted to really just quickly underscore that, the fact that, Jennings, and I appreciate the support of so many people, and Doug and Tamiko know this, like it took private dollars to do certain private things. Like that's the one commonality between myself, Dr. Thurman and Ms. Armstead, you know, with private dollars, we were able to go ahead of time and be one-to-one, have teletherapy ahead of time for our teachers before COVID in BC, like, you know, before Christ. And so and to the commissioner's point, during the pandemic in DC, it was just enough to get by. So we are trying to look at what else now to do. Thank you. All right, next question to the panel. Oh, go ahead. Oh, go ahead. Mrs.
I couldn't
Armstead.
get off my mute fast enough. Sorry about that.
Please do.
So yeah, this is such a beautiful topic. My predecessor, who's now passed on, he had a saying that said, "You can't teach them if you don't love them." And so, from a therapeutic standpoint, there are certain things that, you know, just counselors and therapists can do. But I tell you, the magic that a teacher can bring to this socio-emotional is so tremendous, you know, and especially when you're in person, and students know the teachers and the teachers know the students, and there are people all over the building that say we are a family. So when you recognize that there is something wrong with a student, they're just not themselves, and you can have that private time with them after, that goes such a long way. So I just have to call that out. And I'll also tell you about something that we just implemented, and you can make up your own title, but we borrowed this one. It's called the 105 degree program. And basically what that is saying is that if a kid came to you and their temperature was 105 degrees, you would immediately have to react, right, to get that temperature down. So we have some kids, we have some students that may have some 105 degree temperatures from a socio-emotional, and that's coming out through academics. It could be coming out through behavior. It could be coming out with all kinds of things. And so get the right people in the building to address what the needs are. So that's going to be more conversations with teachers, right? Coming from the person who is now the doctor, if you will, which could be the counselor, it could be a staff member, it could be anybody who's going to love on the child. They're going to have more phone calls going home to the family. They're going to be talking to the student. How are you doing? What do I need to know about? Why is this grade lower? Is it that you have the skill to do it, or is it that you don't, or is it that you're just so far behind right now? What can we put in place to allow you to catch up? So now we're trying to get that 105 degrees down to 104, down to 103. We want it to be at 98. So this is something that we've implemented and we've just really launched it, but it's a family approach to mental health, and the whole school community, the parent community has to be involved. So I wanted to just throw that out there to the group.
And I just want to add that, I mean, I completely agree with that. And Art, I'm glad you put the comment in there about CARES Act funding that we know is coming and is available. We need to keep deepening those relationships with families, with students, having that teacher engagement. But we also need to remember our teachers, and we need to make sure that those supports are in place and easily accessible for our teachers to be able to deal with the trauma that they also experienced, so that they can create that magic for students, because they have to be well themselves in order to be well for the kids. And so I think Misty had even commented about this, that it's not just providing resources, it's also making them accessible and finding ways to encourage and provide avenues for them to receive those resources so that they can be there for their students. And I hope we don't forget that. I think that's super important.
Definitely. So agreed. Go ahead.
I'd just like to jump in for a minute while you're teeing up the next question, and let people know, in case you're not looking, a lot of the attendees are engaging in a pretty active chat on the right-hand side of the webinar. So folks are throwing out ideas, asking questions in the chat. So please have a look. On top of what's happening in the screens, we've got active conversations going on. And thanks, Art. I hope I stalled long enough for you to tee up the next question.
Oh, yeah, you did. I've been watching the chats and replying to people individually and looking at our questions. I want to make sure I get our next questions from the people who are online, and then I have the other questions that I know we have had a chance to see. So the second question was, has it been determined that temperature taking of all students upon arrival makes a difference? That was the question. I know that having been a part of the CDC study, I can answer that one very well. you asked a great question, and I don't want to identify the person just in case they didn't want their name mentioned, but these data shows that the temperature is the least effective method for children. That means 12 and under. It's effective for high schoolers because high schoolers are just like adults. But for middle school and elementary school, it's the least effective method. That's why I showed that chart, page 3 of my PowerPoint, of what are the most high identifiers for COVID-19 for children. They are loss of taste and smell, difficulty breathing or cough, and then the last one, which is can't even mention it. So I said both of them: coughing and difficulty of breathing. So coughing, difficulty of breathing, loss of taste and smell. So once you see your kid, ask those questions, especially if they have one of those. Treat that student as if you're screening for COVID. If they have any of the others, it's likely something else, unless they have multiple factors of the others. So great question. If anybody else wants to add to that, please do. But I think that that's the science, and that's what the CDC study just showed. And a copy of that link is on my PowerPoint if you want to go to that CDC study. The next question was, when providing mental health resources for staff members, how does districts assure utilization, offering the resources necessary, but it's no benefit if people don't use it? If anybody wants to chime in to offering and making sure people use what's offered, making utilization important.
Well, just real quickly, I think one of the big things is timing of those services and other things, and making sure, I mean, if we did that early on, where some of the webinars and things we were doing with teachers were at 7 or 8 o'clock at night, not to interfere with their school day. Well, no one wants to do that at 7 or 8 o'clock at night. So really building in the right appropriate times, making it normalizing the usability, and then allowing for it to happen, I think is appropriate.
A simple way too is to put it as much as you possibly can into some professional development, so that while teachers are already present, that can happen. And we've done that, and that's been helpful.
Thank you so much. I want to jump right into a question specifically for Mrs. Grandale. Your presentation was outstanding. The question is, so tell us how the pandemic affected you. I mean, you're our teacher of the year. What was your journey like? And then help us kind of just take some takeaways for what I call your essential toolkit, a mental emotional toolkit for those tough days. What kind of emotional toolkit that you have to move past those tough days?
Gosh, it's kind of a tough question. I think that all of us, we just went into this year putting 100% in and just trying to figure out, hey, it's going to be okay. When we get to the summer, we're going to be able to get some of this back. But right now, this is what I have to do. And unfortunately, that's not a way to live. And I think most teachers would say that it's been a draining year. And even though so many of us feel as though we've accomplished so much, we also know that so many teachers are considering leaving the profession because of what has happened this year. My own school, which is very small, my high school has 15 teachers in it. 3 of them who are veteran teachers are leaving the profession before they can retire, and it's because of COVID. And so what we have to do is we've got to be able to step back and really think about what have we asked of teachers, and then how can we sort of pay them back for that? And it's a tough question because a lot of them are very disheartened. When you ask me specifically, how did I deal with it? Well, my family, I have a great family and they show me lots of support, but then as well, my teacher family. I have some great colleagues, especially the other ladies who are teachers of the year have been great from that perspective as we talk about each other's districts and what we can do to bring in other ideas into our own districts. But for me specifically, the one thing that does the best for me whenever I get mentally down, honestly, is spending time with kids, because it helps me then to remember why it is I'm doing what I'm doing. And once I can do that, then usually I can go ahead and find that oomph again to really want to be in the classroom and to give them all that I've got. But I'm going to just add real quick, Art, that there are a few things that I really think we need to do for next year, specifically for teachers. And that is, we've got to start adding in more teacher leadership, because teachers felt powerless this year. And in order to give them some of that power back, then we need them in those decision-making roles. And that's going to allow them to feel like they have a say. Plus, you're getting an expert. You're getting the classroom expert, the expert on kids, whenever you have them share their ideas. And so I think that's a great one. And that also helped me because I do have leadership roles in my school. So I did get to feel like I was part of those decisions, that I had a say in what we were doing. And that's such an important aspect for teachers. So.
I love it. I love it. Misty, your answers are impeccable, and you didn't have to stop or rush. So empowering the teacher voice is essential. And I can't even add to that. Everything she said, please take in as leaders and teachers. And if you're a teacher, flex your voice, even if your administration isn't asking for it, and then make them smart enough to start asking for it. Because frankly, some people need a little bit of nudge. And if you're a leader, take it from where you've heard it here, create fit systems of feedback loops so that you're allowing teachers, empowering teachers to do what they need to succeed. And then the loss of great teachers is evidence of the need for it's not just about education, it's about life safety. It's that evaluation question that teachers are asking and principals are asking and superintendents are asking and parents are asking, why do I need to be here? Do I really need to be here? If you have options, then people leave. That will shift the education base and profession to some extent. And we'll be talking more about that future piece on other sessions, but that was such great feedback. Thank you. Doug, did you have anything that you were going to chime in? I saw you kind of inching towards it. If you want to, go for it.
No, I mean, I completely agree with what Misty had said. And I think along with that, it's looking at the expectations we maybe had to place on teachers as the pandemic began. And as we were working through that of you're teaching live to students at the same time, we need you to teach virtually. And at the same time, we need you to individualize and it, it's draining, and it did add to their trauma, and it's adding to teachers leaving the profession. We need to look at this as though there could be a third wave. And if there is a third wave, that's going to push people out the door. And so what do we need to have in place beforehand? And I think then going back to all of those supports we've talked about for teachers is really important. So I guess that just speaks to the urgency of this isn't something we can sit down and say, well, let's do a strategic plan that can last. We can spend the next 12 months on. We've got to build this plane right now while we're flying.
Definitely.
Doug, I'd like to add, Dr. McCoy, also, I'd like to add a kind of yes and I've been fortunate enough to observe the leadership at a school-like institution, the university here at St. Louis University, and I've been able to observe, really close up how the decisions have been mission-centric, focused on the health of our community here in the university and the broader community, focused on saving jobs, not wanting to contribute early on to the unemployment in the region, focused on the least well-paid, the folks who needed the most support. And so while at the other end, faculty end or a teacher end, it might appear that we're making stupid decisions. I'm sure we've made some. It's a really hard time, right? It's a pandemic. But I think the leadership component also allows teachers to see what you administrators are doing. And so things that you've done that might not seem clear and obvious to teachers, the more that there's shared understanding, shared conversation, the teachers will realize the logic behind your decisions and why you've made decisions that might seem difficult and might seem not so clear to the faculty. So I think just greater communication is better all around in a time like this. And I do hope also that we don't have too many people fleeing either of our professions at this time, because we need to realize that the other professions have been hit too. I don't know what we're going to flee to where things are easy in a pandemic. So I hope we band together and figure out how to work through this together and come back smarter and stronger. And I will remain ever the optimist.
No, that's beautiful. I love those comments. I can't add anything to it. You're right. Where are you going to? Unless you can retire, you're going to go somewhere that's going to have similar challenges or challenges nonetheless. Perfect points. I want to echo what was also mentioned. One person mentioned the need for more psychologists, school psychologists, because, who do you turn to? You turn to your school psychologist. I know I mentioned that we added 3 therapists, and we have a school psychiatrist that's focusing with us, Dr. Joan Luby from Washington University, chair of the Department of Psychiatry. But all of that just notes to the point that you got to do something. And so to Doug's point and to others, I had to be honest, leading during this pandemic was the best time in my career, and it was the easiest time in my career for me. But that's because I'm a very different type of person. I say to people, welcome home. If you've been in a place where you've been oppressed as a human being, if you've been, females have female oppression, gender oppression, as we have our first female mayor in St. Louis in 2021, and then African-Americans and many other people of color and many people have been oppressed. Now, the pandemic has allowed me to say to everyone who's not in the category of oppression, welcome home. So it was real easy for me to open school and have school when everybody was calling off like a snow day. Like, I'm doing the opposite of y'all because I'm a creative veteran of suffering. This is my home turf. So yes, I gave 2 steps increases to all my teachers for pay increases because I care about them. Yes, I gave them 20 days off in the sense of virtual learning and saying, don't work, turn this stuff off. You need to recharge yourself. We're in control. I mean, we're going to do this. It's about our safety and welfare. So you got some time out. Yes, I did not do a teacher of the year, nor support staff of the year this year, because I believe all of them are. So I gave them extra money, and I gave them things like jackets and so forth, because you all the teachers of the year this year. We all have been through hell and high water. So we're going to reward each of us. We're just glad we made it. And so that's just a little bit of the McCoy leadership, the real McCoy, but I'm going to tuck myself back in and go back to some questions to make sure that we have everybody have a voice to the table. So the next questions that were asked that were very along those lines are about learning and learning loss. I saw that question, and it was one of the other questions and comments about virtual learning expansion. The question is, what plans do we have to address learning loss? How will parents know? How soon will they know? And do we know what patterns of instructions LEAs are thinking about offering from the state level? So who would like to jump into that question of what plans for learning loss and patterns of LEAs for instruction?
I'd be happy to jump in from the statewide perspective and let you know that, one of the things that I understand is circulating right now is this discussion about whether or not we should be testing. We are testing. We are going to be tying those results to the mode of delivery so that we are able to demonstrate or determine, again, one data point, but being able to see the importance of access to the digital needs that are out there and necessary, and breaking that digital divide. So those are some of the essential things that we're looking at. But I think our schools have a pretty good handle from what they're saying on where kids are when they return to them and where they are at home right now. I have still great concern about those students who we don't know where they are. I mean, I think there are still students out there who we don't know where they really are right now. So when I hear school doors are open and 20% of the kids are returning, how many touch points are happening for the virtual education processes, and will we know? So what I'm hearing most districts talking about, which I think are great strategies, Doug mentioned a lot of them, some of this intensive tutoring, identifying the needs of our students and making sure we're addressing them quickly, keeping the rigor high, making sure we're not lessening our expectations in light of things, because we know we need to continue to maintain high expectations for our students, finding our best teachers and placing them with our kids who need them the most. I mean, there's a lot of strategies that are taking place to work on the accelerated learning process. I also just feel compelled to add that there is learning loss, but there's also been significant learning gain, and that our teachers are quick to point out, let's not lose sight of opportunities that students had that they may have. When I was out of the department for a year, I worked from home, and the learning curve of doing business this way was new for me. And our kids are going to be very well equipped to do some of these 21st century skills. So what have they learned? Where do they need to accelerate the learning process? And let's find those kids who have literally checked out for a year. How do we make sure our schools are the place they want to be and come back?
Amen. I'm sorry. Exactly. Yes, I totally support that and agree. Thank you, Commissioner. Others?
I think it's great that the Commissioner brought up again just this idea of the high dose tutoring and mentoring, and again, this is This isn't a school crisis, this is a community crisis. And how great it would be if our community responded to that. What if our businesses, and I'm stealing this idea from somebody else who brought it up, and I thought it was brilliant, that if we had businesses in the community who said, we're going to reduce work days to 6 hours and give all of our employees 2 hours to be in the schools in the morning, providing that one-on-one tutoring and to provide that wraparound support. We need ways besides money. We need ways for the community to really help to provide that high dose tutoring, to provide that mentoring, and to ensure that the schools can have the supports that they need to move these students forward. We've been using the term learning loss, but let's talk about accelerated recovery and how do we make sure that our foot is on the gas pedal to help these students as quickly as we can.
Thank you. That's exactly right. I agree. I want to make sure that I give time for anyone to reply before I go to the next question, because we got some great questions here. But those are all wonderful remarks. I want to share, and Doug said it well, I don't focus on learning loss because I have to be honest with you. When your life is at risk, there's more decisions being made today than there were before COVID, just to get up and get out of the house. There are more decisions made every second of who you will step by, if this comment is a politicized one of wearing a mask or if it's real, who to believe. So there are more judgment-based questions and actions today that kids are addressing and adults than there ever was in your BC. I want to give you that because 600,000 people have died plus because of it. So everything is about evaluation now. So when you ask if there's learning loss, the question, are you concerned about the 75 show me standards learning loss? Or are you concerned about you lost your life learning loss? Or you lost your mother learning loss? Or you lost your job learning loss? Or you lost your friend learning loss? Or your own spouse doesn't agree with you politically because they think that this is craziness learning loss, a relationship loss, divorce loss. And let's go through the list of losses and ask ourselves, what learning are we talking about? And why is that important? That's why I don't play that game. I definitely respect and love the commissioner's charge to let's get some assessments so we can know what we're talking about. Because we're talking about learning loss without even having given an assessment yet. When have we done that before? I don't do that. So that's why I don't entertain the question yet.
People are thinking I paid you for that response there.
No, I promise you, Doug. Anybody who knows me, and you know me well, knows that Art says whatever he wants, whenever he wants. That is definitely not the commissioner paying me. I truly believe that. But it's just thinking, a different way of thinking. So let's look at what we have with asset space. And I also say that with my benchmark data, my middle school students and 2 grade levels in elementary scored higher during this situation than they did the last year because of less distractions and focus on power standards and so forth, literally. But we did have the technology, we had the Chromebooks, and we had been practicing it for a while. So it wasn't a lot of change, but they scored higher. So that's another reason I don't go there just yet. All right. Next questions to hit. This is real-time discussion, real good stuff. Someone asked the question, decisions in education have become way more politicized in DC than they were in BC. So during COVID, it's political to wear a mask or not, it's political to go to school or not. And so the question is, how have you lived through that, and what do you see for AC and how to navigate through the politicization of education decisions and actions? Great question.
So let's talk about the C word, collaboration. And I will tell you that one of the greatest things I saw over this past year is that there has been that kind of collaboration. Every Wednesday morning for the last year, I've started my morning with leadership from the parochial schools in St. Louis, the independent schools in St. Louis, the superintendent of St. Louis Public Schools, representative from the mayor's office, representative from the health department, every Wednesday morning having a conversation about where are we and what do we need to solve and how do we solve it together. What are the things we were solving? Things like, how do we make sure there's testing in the schools, COVID testing in the schools? How do we make sure every staff member who wants to receive vaccination has an opportunity to receive the vaccination? How do we make sure that out of school learning time, that we really know what's available for our students? We really know where they are to make sure there's equity and access. Lots and lots of things, big things, small things. But the most important thing was every week that educational community was having conversation. And we need to replicate that over and over and over to make sure that that collaboration is there. Because it really doesn't matter where these kids are in school. What matters is what's being provided to them. And so to me, we ignore the tail wagging the dog. We ignore the political headlines. We ignore the disruptors who want to just say that everything's bad. And we figure out collaboratively, how do we move forward in the best interest of these kids? And we actually do it. And I'll stop there.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll just add too, this is, everything you're saying is so true. And Doug, that was very, very well said. For me, I pretty much know that no matter what I do, somebody on social media somewhere is going to be angry. I mean, there's just it, and angry is the word that I use now. And I hate to even have to articulate it that way, but there's just hurt, there's anger, and it does not matter what I do. Someone is going to not like it. And so where I try to going back to the North Star, we do what's best for kids, like always what's best for kids. And so, yes, I went to the White House early on and under the Trump administration and talked about safe reentry to school, because I did believe it was best for kids to be in person, and we were working with the pediatricians and we were working with the scientists and the mental health providers who were telling us that, and I did that. The Biden administration has come out and has said schools should be in school in person. I'm standing right there. I have a call with the secretary tomorrow with her. We will work with whatever political drive is out there to do what's right for kids. And so, I think just acknowledging that we are in our leadership chairs well aware that there are going to be positions that will be taken or will be perceived, and we need to know why we're making the decisions we're making.
Well said. Ms. Armstead.
There's no better focus than that. No better way is to look at this based on what's best for kids. And so for example, for us, when we decided to go back hybrid, we knew that was best for kids because first of all, it had to be best for teachers too, and for students. So similarly to some of what you talked about, Dr. McCoy, like how do we get our teachers back and feeling safe? Because you can't have people feeling like, hey, I'm risking my life to come to school. So putting in following to the T, every single CDC recommendation, and inviting our teachers and our families to see what we were going to put in place, so that they can give us feedback. One of the things that we did though was we put a calendar together that allowed us to start school in hybrid. So half the students came because we had to have the space to, socially distance. But the other thing that we did was say, we're going to pause after that. And then we're going to take feedback, what worked, what didn't work. And then we're going to come back and we're going to make some adjustments. That way we're hearing from our entire community. And it was really a beautiful thing because there was a point where we weren't sure if all of our teachers would, feel like they should be able to come back in person. But what we found, 90% of our teachers came back in person. And what we found is that, and it's really to Misty's point, is that the energy, and when folks are down, they get their energy and from the kids. So being in the building together is for all of our mental health, for the students' mental health, for the teachers' mental health, for the administrators' mental health. I mean, the summer's here. If students aren't in the building, there's no life here. So for us, that hybrid model allowed us to scale and ramp ourselves up to adjust and pivot as we needed to, and do that. By doing that, it is what was best for our families. It was best for our students. We've learned a lot, and and Fridays, for example, those are our days to do tutoring. So some of the things that we talk about, my point is that some of the things that we talk about that we need from outside, we don't. We can figure a lot of things out right in our own buildings through our own creativity with our calendars, with our own ways to provide tutoring from some of our own teachers, by listening to our teachers, by listening to our students, and by listening to our families. There's so much that we can do, at least at Carter-Ritter, right here in our own building to make this thing work.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. I want to call out Misty and say, Misty, please give us your perspective also as a leader.
Well, and I think, the classroom perspective is so different too on this because, what Margie was saying about what we're always doing, what we think is right for kids. And that's so true. But politicization is really abstract in the classroom. And when the kids are sitting in their desks, they don't care about politics. They don't even care what their mom put on Facebook. They don't care. What they're doing is they're learning. And even if that's through a screen, what teachers have found is if we continue to focus on kids, if we continue to give them what they need, that bigger picture of the outside world just doesn't matter. And I think as a state, we have to just continue doing that. Give kids what they need. The rest of it just doesn't matter.
Wow. I gotta underscore what you said. I might steal Misty. You looking for a job, Misty? I'm sorry. I just had that. But so as a soundbite, people say this in politics, and I'm a politician as a superintendent. So let me say this. Let me connect the two. I'm an educator. I'm about kids more than anything. I don't play politics, but I'm forced to sometimes. All politics is local. And so what Misty just said was the kids don't give a care. They care about their reality. Because their politics is like their classroom, their school, their house, their local issue. And so then it kind of matriculates up to the state level and the national level and so forth. And so I think there's so much credence in that. And so, well, many of you know me, not all of you, but I did whatever I thought was best for not only my kids, but for my teachers who serves the kids. Because I know I'm not teaching all 3,000 or 4,000 students. It's my teachers who are. So I do what's best for the kids through my teachers. And if that meant time off, that meant time off. If it meant more material supplies, that meant that. If that meant doing 12-to-1 classroom ratios, which we did because my teachers told me, we did it. And when I had teachers from another school district, one teacher from another school district come to try to protest the governor coming here to tell principals and superintendents to, do contact tracing and then try to start school, I had my teachers union call that other teacher and teacher's place and say, don't you come here. We wrote a list of what we wanted. They did it and wouldn't open it till it was done. And we got our stuff met, so tell them to do that. And so I'm just telling you, that's what's needed, empowering the voices of the teachers and the people, the community to meet the need at the speed of the need. Thank you.
And
go ahead.
If I could just piggyback on that, it's just so profound, everything that everybody's saying. I get so excited about it. When you don't do what you just articulated, what Misty just said and what Dr. McCoy said, your school is going to be dysfunctional. It is going to, you are not, all the stuff you write down and everything you want to accomplish and higher order thinking skills and all that, it is not going to work if you are not connecting with your teachers. And if teachers aren't connecting with students, it just won't work. We stubbed our toe. This one time during the pandemic, it was last semester, administrators wanted more time with students ourselves. So we started calling kids out of classrooms and meeting with them about this, that, or the other. And teachers met separately outside of us to talk about all the interruptions. Well, what we found out was that they didn't want to have their students leaving their classrooms because they want to be with kids at all times. Something that simple really helped us to understand, like, their voices, they want to be with kids, and we've got to figure out how to do that outside of them. It may sound very, very simple, but when you are not in line, kids know it, you feel it. So I just really want to reiterate everything that everybody is saying, that you will not have a really good environment if you're not engaging your teachers, asking for feedback. Just because we have a great idea, it does not mean that it's a great idea. So, and teachers may think it's a great idea, but in practice, it may not be a great idea. So we've got to really continue to always, I can't stress that enough, continue to get that feedback from our teachers and our students and our parents.
That's exactly right. Thank you so much. I see 4 comments I want to make mention of. I won't mention their names in case they want to stay anonymous, but they did reply to all, so I might. But one said, you can't forget the fact that we got vulnerable children and they're disproportionately affected. And the person listed it out, and including disabilities or multi-abilities, other abilities, as I call it. That is so important that we move at the speed of the need, but we measure it on a chart because what's on the chart is what's on our heart, so we can track the progress. So thank you for pointing that out, the disproportionality and the need for social justice. Then another person mentioned, thanks for mentioning the after school and out of school aspect to learnings. And I totally am a proponent of this. Like when it was not safe to come to school, it was safe to be outside to do things individually or with your family, take walks, learning walks, painting, drawing, journaling, and service learning projects with your domicile group. If it's your parents, it's your parents. If it's somebody else, like in our Hope House, we got 20, 30 homeless kids who live together. They're safe, they're fine. That's their learning pod. And it's kind of like making public school like homeschooling networking pods, but by the public school. And then I tell my parents, this isn't homeschooling because you're still using our curriculum, our materials, our books, our so forth, and our strategies. And homeschooling is when we say, we don't give a darn, you do it and we don't care. That's not what you're doing. We care, we support you. And so out of school learning is essential in DC. The other point was how to help move towards the collaboration and understanding how to stop politicizing it in AC. That was the comment, the last part of the one question I asked. The person mentioned how to help get to AC, which then makes me make the comment of Dean Ritter, that we have future sessions to talk about AC more. Because again, I'm firmly convinced the data shows, the commissioners here and others, we are going to be in this alternate type of operation for at least next school year, and I argue even 1 year after that to 22-23. AC is going to be a 23-24 type thing where COVID-19, it's after COVID is no longer a threat to our life or a threat to our way of life. That's going to take a while, the threat to our way of life, because people are choosing what to do and what not to do. And it still is going to affect us for a little while. All right, having said that, I want to give every panelist a minute to 2 minutes to give your closing final thoughts, ideas, suggestions to the group. And this has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you for the energy, the passion, and the truth, the honesty. Let's start with Misty, because you've been awesome. Then we'll end with our commissioner, I believe. But go for it, Misty. 2 minutes.
Okay, yeah, 2 minutes. I don't know. I probably won't take 2 minutes, but I do want to just say that I think part of what has made us so successful this year, and I do think Missouri has been successful, is the fact that the communities have really come together. Parents have done their job as parents. Teachers have done their job, administrators have done their job. And what that means then is that it really shows us if we come together, even if we don't always agree, we will do what is best for kids. And when we do that, everything else is going to be okay. It has been a tough year, but I am so, so proud of the work that educators have done on every single level. And, we focused on hard truths, but in reality, I think we're so lucky that we have accomplished all that we have and that we're sitting here today talking about next year already, because we are forward facing. We're ready to do more, and we're ready for our kids to succeed beyond COVID.
Wonderfully said. Thank you so much. And it's been a pleasure to get to know you through this interaction. And I tell you, tell your superintendent to watch out, because I might be knocking on your door. All right, let's do my friend Doug Thurman. Dr. Thurman, go for it, sir.
So how to put all of this in just a minute or two. One, let's make sure our educators are okay. Let's make sure they have the supports they need in place to make sure that they're solid and they can provide students with the supports they need to make sure our kids are okay. And the socio-emotional supports are there. Community engagement, again, community engagement is so important. Making sure that, the high needs tutoring is in place and that those wraparound supports, those out of school time supports are there to really lean into the school and provide these kids with ways to accelerate their learning and accelerate their recovery. And finally, when the media obsesses on single data points and uses them as hammers over the head to say, you're bad, you're wrong, you're not doing this right, everything's a mess, let's stay focused on why we're doing this and what our kids need, because they're going to start looking for other data points for new hammers. So we need to make sure that we stay focused on kids and on our staff so that everybody is well and can move forward out of this pandemic and forward.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Thurman. Appreciate you. To Miss CEO Armstead.
You know, I like to use my couple of minutes to just encourage people who are on here, be it teachers, be it a parent or a person who's a teacher and a parent, just because we've had this experience of this school year coming back in person, and we have not had any mass outbreaks of COVID because we have followed the guidelines. So I want people to not necessarily think about the anxiety that can surround this, because this has been an hour and a half of a lot of information. And so I really want to encourage people to think that this is going to work. People have done it. People have been successful. School districts that are on here being represented have all kinds of great ideas and all kinds of results. So I just want everybody to know that it can be done. Kids can be okay. Teachers can be okay. I know it sounds like cliche. We can all get through this because we have. It's not that we're talking just about the future. We've got so much data from the past year that we're using right now that we can parlay into the future. So I just want everybody to be encouraged that this is going to be okay, and our kids and our teachers and our families are going to be okay.
Beautiful. Thank you for addressing the crowd. You know, I want to say you could run for mayor anytime. Oh, no, we got a good one, so maybe next time. No, but you did what's the right thing to do. You addressed the people, and many people don't feel okay. And thank you for making us know that together it's going to be all right. Commissioner Margie Van Dieven.
Hey, thank you very much. Yeah, what a great event this has been. I've gotten a lot of your energy, and it's so fun to see how everybody gets so passionate about this important topic. You know, when Misty talks about getting her energy from students, I do that as well. I'm a teacher at heart. But I also get my energy in thinking about AC. That this is the time, everyone out there, this is the time. We're going to have unprecedented funding coming in right now to think about how education will not look the same. Even if we tried, education will not look the same. So let's embrace the opportunity to do something a little bit differently. And I will quote the secretary. I wrote him a note and told him I'm going to quote him on this, Secretary Cardona, when he said, every decision we make will either close the gap or exacerbate it. That's a tremendous responsibility for every single one of us. This is the time, this is an opportunity. Let's think about it, and let's think about every single child in every decision that we make. So thank you so much for the opportunity, and look forward to hopefully tuning in again on one of these soon.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. It's an honor to be with you always. And we thank you for your leadership. We thank you for the headaches. And we thank you for the support. People don't say it enough. Thank you. I want to take the 30 seconds, because we're still a minute ahead, to give you my one sentence closing remark. Welcome home. Welcome home. Equity is what we need. Just as the commissioner said, anything that we do is either going to exacerbate the gaps and the issues of inequities, or it's going to close the gaps and solve inequities. So what is equity? Because everybody talks about it. No one really defines it clearly. So I'm going to give you my definition and I'm done. Equity is meeting the needs at the speed of the need. That's why AC is exciting, because they're going to be needs and we're going to meet them at the speed that they're needed. The poetic way of saying what equity is equity is what love looks like in public amongst strangers. So if you feel love and you see love, equity is happening somewhere. Yep. All right. That's it. We're on the mark. Dean, you want to close it out? If you don't, thank you all. And it's been a pleasure to lead this conversation.
I'll just close out with a great thank you. It's great to see you all. The energy was fantastic. We look forward to seeing you 2 months down the road at the next one. We're interested in your input on who you'd like to see, what questions you'd like us to ask. And there's been lots of great resources in the chat. I'm sure that we will be saving the chat, and we can share that info with the panelists, the attendees, and all the participants. Thanks a lot. I guess we've got to get back to the work. Lots of work to do, Art, to get ready for AC. Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thank you.